So this last week, at the end of the Torah portion, the last chapter is about over 40 verses, and there's a length. Much is spoken about the family of Esav, the offspring of Esau. It's interesting because it's not usually a part of the Torah that we really talk so much about. It's just all these family names of Esav's kids. Welcome, Noga. And the various princes that were from Esav. Then it goes on to talk about the kings that ruled in the land of Edom. The kings that ruled in the Edomite kings that ruled in Israel before the Jewish kings came along. So the Jewish kings were much later. We know that there was King Saul and King David and King Solomon, but there were Edomite kings also, or kings that were put in place. I'm going to try this. Second. Kings that were put in place by Edom, and the Torah tells us all about them. Interesting, at the beginning of this week's Torah portion in Vayeshev, so actually, it says that these are the children of the, it says this is the offspring of Jacob, Joseph, and then it goes on to the whole story of Joseph, with many more details than was spoken about with Esav's family, obviously, and all the next few portions are talking about Joseph and Joseph's brothers and various stories that happened with them, eventually ending in the second to last portion of Bereshit of Genesis, where Jacob actually comes to Egypt to join Joseph. So Rashi says over here at the beginning of Vayeshev, we've got to go back to last week, Vayishlach, but Rashi says that it's like someone that is searching for a jewel or a beautiful stone, searching in searching in sand, and sifting through all this different sand and looking until they find a jewel. And finally, when they find it, he throws away all the dirt that's accumulated and takes the jewel. So similarly, in this case, this is all a lead up. In order to talk about Jacob's family, we first have to talk about Esav's family, who was the older brother, and what happened with Esav's family. But still, there's much length about this story. And an interesting thing is that when the Torah tells us about the different kings that ruled, the Torah tells us about their locations, about where they each came from. So we're talking over here, we're in chapter 36, verse 31. So first it talks about the different kings, Bela ben Ba'ar, then there was Yaakov ben Zerach, and it says each one of their names with the place that they came from. Now, just to give an intro of the Chassidus on Esav, which we've spoken about in the past, that Esav in the revealed parts of the Torah, in at least the way it's understood, the way the Torah has been understood for generations, for many generations, has been that Esav was the wicked one, and he was the wicked one. Practically speaking, Esav was up to all sorts of. He was up to murder. He was up to there was idol worship. There were all sorts of negative behaviors that Esav was what Esav did, until what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, was it last week, how Esav actually caused his father to become blind through his wives offering the incense on the altar for the idols. But from a Hasidic perspective, Esav actually has a higher source than Jacob, which is why Esav was the firstborn. Esav comes from a higher spiritual source, from the worlds of Tohu, which are above the worlds of Tikkun. Tikkun is the more systemized, built up worlds, where Tohu is the world where everything broke because there was too much light and no vessel, and the vessels were unable to handle the light. So Esav comes from the higher worlds. This is how the kabbalah and how the Chassidus at length talks about Esav in contrast to Jacob, and that was why Isaac wanted to bless Esav, because obviously Isaac was a tzaddik. He was a good, righteous person, and he knew somewhat Esav's behavior. from a spiritual standpoint, he saw that Esav has tremendous potential. Esav comes from a very high source. And he wanted to give those blessings, which were the blessings of the Jewish people, the blessings of God, the biggest blessings of Hashem that were given, that were passed down from Abraham and then to him, to give them to Esav, who was the next one along, who was from a very high source. But with Rivka, who recognized that Esav wasn't yet ready for those blessings. He wasn't going to be able to. He didn't have the vessels to receive the blessings and to use them in a way that wouldn't overwhelm him and wouldn't actually get lost, but they would actually get used out properly. She saw that Jacob needs to get the blessings, and he will help through his offspring and through the purpose of the Jewish people in the world to help refine Esav and Esav's offspring. And this week's Torah portion, last week's Torah portion, when Jacob sends the messages to Esav at the beginning of the portion, what's really happening is, according to Chassidus, is Yaakov is testing the waters to see, is Esav ready yet to be refined? So yes, he sent gifts and he was trying to appease him, and he got ready for war just in case Esav would want to fight with him. But there was also a certain, from a spiritual standpoint, Yaakov was trying to see, is Esav ready? And it would actually play out in the practical world down here, seeing how Esav behaves. Is he ready to be refined? Is he ready?
Was he ready?
I'm sorry?
Well, what do we know? Was he ready?
Well, what happens is, this is a good question. What happens is, they meet, and Yaakov hugs, he bows down to Esav, and they hug and they kiss, and it says that on the word Vayishakeo, and he kissed him, there are dots in the Torah, so very unique. It doesn't usually have dots on top of the word.
Right, a whole bunch of them.
Right, and this symbolizes, these dots symbolize there's two different explanations, but one of them is that he kissed Esav with all of his heart at that moment, even though Esav was not on the level that he was, but he connected with him on a very deep level. At the same time, Jacob saw that he wasn't yet ready, and that's where we see that Esav said, let's walk together, let's travel together. And Yaakov said, my sheep, the sheep are slow, and the kids are young, and I'm not going to be able to keep up with your pace. So you go ahead, you go at your pace. Don't do me any favors. You go ahead, and until we meet in a place called Seir. Now we don't find that they ever met in Seir.
In where?
Seira. Adasha avo al Adoni Seira. Until I come.
Seira. Okay, yeah.
In Seir. Seira is in Seir. So we don't find that they ever met in Seir.
Mm-hmm.
So the explanation brought by Rashi and brought by the various commentaries is that this is really he's saying eventually when Mashiach comes, it says that the ones that will go up on the mount of Zion to judge the people of Esav, and this is when we're going to reunite with Esav when Mashiach comes, and that is when the refinement is going to be complete. The whole purpose of the exile, the whole purpose of everything that the Jewish people have been through, is to work in the world, to work on refining the world and to help be a light unto the nation, until eventually we're able to also uplift and refine Esav and Esav's descendants. Now, jumping back, this was the Chassidus in short on the story of Esav and Jacob. There's tons more. It's really the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, first Chabad Rebbe, who actually tonight and tomorrow and Wednesday are very special days on the calendar, on the Chabad calendar, really celebrated in a lot of the Jewish world for the fact that this was a day when the Alter Rebbe came out and was liberated from jail. He was arrested for various lies that were said about him, that was rebelling against the Russian government and other things like that. And he was released from jail, and that's when he started to teach Chassidus on a much greater abundance. And it's known in the Chassidic world as the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus, because it's the beginning. That's when we start learning the Tanya, and there's many celebrations that happen on that day. So the Alter Rebbe has so much about this story of Esav and Jacob, and then his son, his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, has much more about it. But this was in short a little bit about a little teaspoon from the whole story, from the whole Kabbalistic perspective of Yaakov and Esav. Now, going back to last week's portion, and Vayishlach, at the end of the portion what we spoke about before. So I mentioned that it says the location for each king. So starting from in chapter 36, verse 31, and going through the next 7 or 8 verses.
36.
Yeah, Lamed Vav, Pasuk Lamed Aleph. It goes through all of the different kings that ruled in Edom.
Okay.
And only there's one of them that Rashi actually stops and points out something about him. This is the one. This is verse number 33, where it says that Bela, who was the second king, died, and who ruled after him? A fellow called Yovav, the son of Zerach, from the place called Batsra. Yovav ben Zerach mi Batsra. He was the next king.
This is, you said 30, 36, and what? What's the verse?
Well, it starts at 31, and the one that we just spoke about was 33. So Rashi says, this Yovav ben Zerach from Batsra is actually not from Edom. Batsra is actually a place in Moab, another country, which was next door to Edom.
I can't find it.
No, me neither.
Lamed Vav, chapter 36. Chapter 36, verse 31.
31 is Lamed
Aleph.
Right? Lamed is 30, right?
Lamed Aleph is 31.
Okay. אלה המלכים אשר מלכו באדום לפני זה, וימלוך באדום בלה בן באור ושם ירוד.
So Rashi says,
oh, that's Lamed. So it's already Lamed Bet. Lamed Bet, Lamed. Okay, וימת באלוהים. יובב בן זרח מבצרה. That one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Rashi says that Batsra is actually from Moab. As it says in Jeremiah, it puts Batsra together with a bunch of different cities in Moab.
Mm-hmm.
It names it together with other cities in Moab. Mm-hmm. Now, why is it also, do we find that the place of Batsra is also mentioned in conjunction with Edom, which is the country that we're talking about over here? Because they took a king from Batsra. Since Edom, one of the kings of Edom that we're talking over here about, the Edomite kingdom, which was Esav's offspring, since they took a king from Batsra, which was in Moab, so therefore Batsra is going to be punished together with the people of Edom. But really, Batsra is from Moab. Batsra is not from Edom. And this fellow comes from there. He doesn't even come from Edom. He was a king that came out from a different place, and he was brought to be the king in this place. Now, the interesting point is that this is actually brought by many of the other commentaries. All of the other cities that were mentioned by the other kings are also not cities that are in Edom. They're also cities from other places. They were also kings from other places that they brought in. They brought in other people from other countries to rule over their country. But Rashi doesn't say anything by any of the other kings. Specifically points out when it comes to this Yovav ben Zerach, the son of Zerach.
Yeah, so why, what does he want from this guy?
Good question, right?
Yeah.
What countries are these currently?
Somebody better with the map than I am. They're somewhere in Syria or maybe going on to Iraq or Iran, but I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
Yeah. All next to Israel, really, because that's where when the Jewish people came into Israel, 40 years after the exodus from Egypt, so they had to go all the way around these countries. These were they're really where Jordan and Syria are now, I think, Moab and Edom and Midian. So these were the countries that were on the border of Israel, on the the right side.
Thank you.
So if we go take a look back in the blessing that when do we first find about the existence of Yaakov and Esav, these two people? We find when we find about their birth, the story of their birth, or really the story of the pregnancy that led up to their birth. In the beginning of the portion of Toldus, so we're mixing together from all the different portions over here, but this is really how Genesis works. Everything is filling in from a different place. If we look in chapter 25, verse 23, Chaf Hey, Chaf Gimel, the beginning of Toldot, the beginning of that portion. So it says that Rebecca had terrible pain in her womb. And she consulted with God, which is actually explained by the commentaries to mean that she went to the yeshiva of Shem. Shem was the son of Adam, and Shem was the one who had this study center where all of the forefathers learned. And she went to Shem and Eber, who was another fellow over there, another sage, and she asked them, what is going on? Can you give me there's a question why she didn't ask her own husband, who was also a righteous person, but Yitzchak, but instead she went to Shem and Eber and she asked for their explanation on what's going on with him. And this is what is responded to her. The answer was that there are shnei goyim bebitnech. There are two nations, literally translated as nations, inside of your womb. Or shnei le'umim in be'ayich paredu, and two nations from your womb from inside of you will separate. Will go in two different directions. Ula'om mil'om ye'ematz. What does that mean? Ula'om mil'om ye'ematz. That the way Rashi explains, when one is strong, that they will constantly wrestle with each other, and one will always override. It will always be one on top of the other. One will be the underdog. One will be the one on top. So there will always be fighting, and it will be like a wrestling match where they never win. But the older one will serve the younger one. Now, if we look at the verse from a simple standpoint, the two first things that are told to Rivka, which is that there will be two nations. There are two nations inside of you, and two nations will come out of you, and they'll go in two different directions. It seems to be saying the same thing two times. That there are two nations coming out of her. If we look at the second part of the verse that says that there's going to be a constant wrestling match, and the older one is going to serve the younger one, it seems like a contradictory point, because first we're saying that they're going to be constantly wrestling with each other. There's never going to be one, and they're never going to fully win. And on the other hand, we're saying the older one is going to be the slave to the younger one, which implies that the younger one is going to be the leader, is going to be the ruler. So how do we understand this verse? From a simple understanding of the verse, how do we understand what's actually going on over here? First of all, we're repeating things, and secondly, we seem to be contradicting. One point is contradicting another. So this is where we fill in from another place, which is, welcome Shira. This is where we fill in from another place, which is, and I want to thank Shira for recommending the phone scheme, because that's working better with our sound, I hope. So if we look at Isaac's blessings to Yaakov, to Jacob, the whole story of the end of the portion of Toldus, of the end of that portion where they're born, where Yaakov sneaks in and gets the blessings instead of Esav. So Isaac says, you are going to be a master to your brother. To Jacob, he says this. And then when Esav came in and said, "Please, Father, bless me also. I also want a blessing." So Yaakov, so what did Yaakov say to him? Yaakov said to him, "I already blessed your brother. It's too late."
Well, I think what he says, which is more interesting, is, do you have only one blessing?
Yes, you have only one blessing, exactly. So you could bless me also. And
Right.
what does Yaakov say? What does Yitzchak say in response? I want to find the actual verse over here.
He says, it's a Lamed Tet, I don't know what that is, 39.
39, yeah.
No, he actually does give him something.
Yeah.
He
So
does
he does give him a blessing.
He does give him a blessing, which actually is a little bit like the blessing that he gave Jacob.
Similar, right?
The beginning of it is almost the same.
But earlier, if we look in the earlier verse, where in verse 36, Esav says that you promised me a blessing. You made a blessing for me. And in verse 37, Yitzchak responds. This is before the second time when he talks to him, which is what you just mentioned, Noga.
Yeah.
Yitzchak responds, I already have it. I made him a master to you.
Right.
And I gave all of his siblings to him as slaves. In other words, as Rashi explains, it's too late. You're already a slave to him. It doesn't make a difference if I'm going. I can't. If he's the master, you're the slave. Even if I bless you, those blessings are really going to belong to him because he's your master. The way slaves really worked, and especially especially when we look at slaves in the Torah, a slave is everything belongs to the master. So I'll bless you and I'll give you all these whatever it is. But ultimately,
Oh,
now
What? Sound.
Yeah.
sound got messed up.
Sound.
Somebody tried calling me, and
that's the problem with that cell
But
phone.
now we can hear you again.
how about now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
A little bit.
A little bit or better?
I hear you well. I don't know.
Good.
Okay.
So, in other words, the blessings, whatever blessings I'll give you, they already belong to God. So I can't really bless you. I can't really bless you with the same blessing that I gave him. But then, as you mentioned before, Noga, he does give him a blessing in verse 40, starting in verse 39, but going on in verse 40.
Mhm.
He says that you will live by the sword and you'll serve your brother. You'll be a slave, like I said. However, when you become aggravated, and then you'll take off the yoke from you'll be able to remove the yoke from your neck.
Right.
Meaning, in other words, you are a slave to your brother. And that's without condition. That's the fact. You're the slave. And I already said that earlier on. But if there's a time, as Rashi explained, that the Jewish people are not abiding by the Torah, and they're not deserving, they're not actually showing that they deserve the blessings that I gave to Jacob, then
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
And the sound got worse.
Yeah.
it got worse. Now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Everyone, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know which part we got lost at over here. But anybody want to fill in where was the last part that we
How the son can become blessed.
right. So at a time, thank you. So at a time when the Jewish people are going to not abide by the Torah, and they're going to show that they're not deserving of the blessing, then even though in essence you're a slave, you'll be able to remove the yoke. You won't have to serve him. And this goes back to earlier where Hashem told Rebecca that there are two nations coming out of you. And first he says to her that they're going to be in a constant wrestling match, which means that when one is standing, the other one is going to be on the ground, and when one is on the ground, the other is going to be standing. It's going to be constant how do you say, constant struggle between them. But on the other hand, she's also told that V'rav Yavod Tza'ir, that the older one will serve the younger one. The older one will always be a slave to the younger one. So in essence, Esav is always going to be a slave to Jacob. So yes, there will be times when Esav will be strong, because the Jewish people are falling. But in essence, Esav will be a slave to Jacob. This is what's happening when we go back to that verse, which is really the same thing that happens which Yitzchak reiterates many years later. He reiterates it to Esav when Esav comes to get the blessing. Now, based on all of this that we just said, comes the big question, which is, how could it be that all of these kings ruled from Esav's offspring? A king means a ruler. A king doesn't just mean no yoke from the master. A king means that they're going to rule. They're going to be their leaders. How did these kings come to rule over the whole land of Edom? Here we see that Esav's family were actually masters. They weren't just servants. They weren't just slaves. They were the masters. Mm-hmm. This whole chapter that talks about the princes and the kings of Esav. Mm-hmm. So this is what Rashi pointed. This is what is being pointed out over here. That none of these kings actually came from Edom. They all came from other places. There were no people that were in essence kings, that were in essence masters, that came from Esav's offspring. They weren't really fitting to be kings. They weren't really fitting to be leaders. Yes, they had some kind of a government, some kind of a rulership, some kind of a king, which was a king from somewhere else. But they themselves were not in essence leaders. Because they had already been told, going back to the story of the birth of Esav, that Esav will never be the king. But Rashi points out specifically when it comes to Yovav, the son of Zerach, because if we look earlier in the chapter, I don't remember offhand the verse, but earlier on in this same chapter, it talks about Esav's children, the kids that his wives bore to him, and one of them is called Zerach. The name that we just mentioned, Yovav, the son of Zerach. So we see that there was a king, there was somebody from Esav's offspring who was a king. So Rashi says, no, this was a different Zerach. Zerach, as we'll see, the name Zerach comes up also in this week's Torah portion, next week's Torah portion. Zerach is a familiar name. It comes up in a few places. This is a different Zerach. Yes, Esav had a son called Zerach, but this Zerach is really a Zerach that comes from Moab, which is why if we look in Jeremiah, he's mentioned together with the Moabite people, not with the Edomite people. The reason that we're mentioning him with Edom in this case, or in some other cases, is because he's going to be punished with Edom. But in essence, he comes from a different place. And this brings us back to the Chassidus, which is the real question over here. Based on all of this, the beginning of a Yishlach, the beginning of last week's portion, how could Jacob lower himself to send all these gifts to Esav, to appease Esav, naming Esav a number of times as his master? Yaakov says he sends the servants, he sends his people, his messengers with the gifts to Esav, and he says, "So said your servant Jacob." And he keeps on mentioning that Esav is the master and he's the servant, he's a slave. And this seems to not fit with the whole point that we're saying all around over here, which is that Esav wasn't really a master. And Jacob was the master. Jacob was the one who was the leader over here. Go on, David.
Well, it seems to me, I'm just taking a wild guess here, that we're talking about when Mashiach comes and Esav is higher, and this is from a spiritual level, that he'll be the spiritual master. He'll be at the higher level.
That's the Chassidic explanation, is that in essence, Jacob is not talking to Esav just as in his human body that he is right now, who is a wicked person. Jacob is talking to his essence, to Esav's source. He's going to a higher place, which is he's trying to connect with Esav on his source. But on the other hand, from a simple interpretation, and the simple interpretation and the Hasidic esoteric explanation all come together. From a simple explanation, it says in the Midrash that we learn from here that we are allowed to machnif, which means to pretend to. I'm looking for the right word in. I mean, the probably not a very normal word to use. Usually would mean to suck up. To suck up the Esav. So he was like, you're allowed to do that to a wicked person for the purposes of peace. So really, Jacob knew that he wasn't the master. Jacob was the master. But for the purpose of peace, he pretended that to make peace with him, he lied to him. He didn't tell him the truth, which doesn't fit with what we're saying according to Chassidus. In his source, he was actually higher. The Midrash also says that he was punished because of this. I'm not sure what the punishment was, but according to Chassidus, to say that Jacob was sinning over here, that Jacob was actually lying and not telling the truth in order to bring peace about is a difficult explanation, because we find that as we mentioned many, many times, the patriarchs and the matriarchs were righteous people. And everything that happened over here is not just weren't mistakes and things to tell us in order to tell us their shortcomings, but actually bring out more of a depth about their characteristic in a positive sense. Go on, David.
And that's exactly the same as Aaron, making peace between husbands and wives and the others. And Moses kind of discovered that when he was time for him to die, that people loved Aaron more. And so there's kind of something about this that's a bigger teaching, I think, within.
Yes. Go on, Noga.
Maybe this interpretation that I don't know, I'm having a hard time. So my interpretation is this is very masculine, that somebody has to be stronger than the other, and one has to be the master and the other one has to be the slave. And maybe Jacob just realized after all this ups and downs that he wants to be in peace with his brother and not have more fights, and that one of the land is big enough and nobody has to be anybody's master. And he just a few sentences before, I sent you all the tune last year, a little song about it, that he's asking God to save him, right? So he's terrified. And so when Esav runs towards him and hugs him and kisses him, maybe there's some relief. It's like, oh, he's not trying to kill me, and everything's okay, and we can live separately, and I don't have to be his master, and he doesn't have to be my master.
So almost everything that you're saying fits beautifully with the Hasidic explanation, which is that Jacob was testing the waters to see, is Esav ready for peace? Mm-hmm. And he saw that Esav was ready for peace, but at the same time, he didn't join along with Esav on the trip afterwards. When Esav offered to him, let's travel together, he said, no, I'm going to go slow, you go ahead. Right. Now, from a more broader perspective, when we take into context that these Esav and Yaakov are the grandparents of nations that then lived in the world and continue to live in the world today. The Jewish people are still around, and the Jewish people have been through a lot. And all of these stories that happen in the book of Bereshit and the book of Genesis are not just stories that happened 4,000 years ago that are nice bedtime stories to tell our kids, but they're actually stories that have a deeper meaning and a deeper message in what the Jewish people have been through and what we're headed towards, and what is our role in this world as different than everybody else. We are certainly different than everybody else. We certainly stuck out different than everybody else, both in positive sense, that we are when we are acting the way we're supposed to, like it says, like we said about the blessings to Jacob, that when you're going to be the way you're supposed to, then you'll be a master, but not in the sense of a master and a slave that we God forbid, hurt anybody else or we torment anybody else, but in the sense that we lead the way to as the leaders to show to spread the light, to help others see the real purpose of the creation of the world, the real purpose of why Hashem wants us all here in the world, not just to live our lives and to enjoy ourselves, but actually to make this world a better place. And with the Torah that we have, and with the blessings that we have passed down from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, specifically to Jacob and specifically to Jacob's children, we are able to fulfill that. However, when we don't act the way we're supposed to, then other things happen, and then that, like Jacob said, like Isaac said to Jacob, the hands are the hands of Esav, but the voice is the voice of Jacob, meaning that the hands, when it comes to Esav ruling over the Jewish people, God forbid, it's not in a peaceful way. It's in
We have a lot of Esav within the Jewish people.
Of course we do. We have every characteristic is in everybody. We all share. You're talking about masculine and feminine. We all have a masculine and feminine part to us, and we all have a part of Sarah and Rivka and Rachel and Leah and Jacob and Joseph and all of these people inside of us. And these are all messages in the way we live our lives, the way we live we lead our families, and the way we use our roles in the world to bring a light onto others and to help others. 100%.
Okay.
Let's just to finish the point over here. That according to Chassidus, this wasn't a negative behavior. Where Jacob says, you're my master and I'm the slave. So that slave is not saying that I want to be in peace with you. Slave is saying I'll become the underdog to you. And that doesn't fit with the fact that in essence Hashem had given Jacob the role of a leader, not the role of the underdog, not the role of the one that's going to be mistreated by his older brother. So yes, Jacob was focused on Esav's source, but to bring it down also on a very down to earth level, which is that Esav was still not a righteous person. And we found, I mentioned last week the story of Esav when he fought over the grave, and wanted to be buried instead of Jacob in the tomb of Machpelah, even later on, many years later.
When was that? I don't remember seeing it anywhere.
I told the story from the Talmud. I think I told it a couple of weeks ago.
Talmud, okay.
So on a deeper level, there are two ways of refining. Just in short, there are two ways of when there's negative, when there's bad, when there's negative traits, there are two ways of refining it. There's one way, which is to overwhelm it with light, which is like the menorah, right? In a dark room, we light the menorah, and the menorah brings light to the whole room. Another way is to So this light pushes away the darkness. The darkness is expelled by itself. The darkness loses its existence, basically, in the face of this light. Another way is that the one who is trying to refine and to overcome the bad doesn't just push it away, spread the light and push away the darkness, but he actually goes and takes the bad and works with the bad to help it refine, to help it be elevated, to actually be transformed to goodness. I'm sorry?
It reminds me a little bit of the story of Saint Francis and the wolf.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Saint Francis of Assisi. Love is essentially loving your enemy.
Okay, that's the point of it. Yes.
Yeah.
So what is one way better than the other? So it depends for who. For the one who's trying to shine the light, the first way is much safer because he pushes away the bad and he doesn't have to deal with it. Dealing with the bad, dealing with the negative is always a risk because you might get pulled down. So if you wrestle with a manuva, which means with a not good person, you might also become not good. So getting down to that level is not so safe. Maybe stay away, maybe stay insulated. Don't, spread the light, spread the light, but don't actually deal with it. Don't actually deal with the bad, just push it away. But for the one who is for the bad, the second way is for sure better, because in this way, the bad stays in existence, but it is transformed to light. It's transformed to goodness. Instead of becoming completely destroyed and nullified, it actually gets elevated to the goodness. It says in the laws of Hanukkah, it says at the end of the laws of Hanukkah in Maimonides, it says if you have the choice between, you have only one candle, and it's the Friday night, it's Friday Eve, and you have the choice of either lighting the Shabbat candle or lighting the Hanukkah candle. Which one do you like? Shabbat, Maimonides say. Why? Because the purpose of the Shabbat candle is to bring peace in the home, and the whole purpose of the Torah is peace. And that light overrides even the importance of the Hanukkah candles. We don't have to talk too much. Everyone knows about it. How unique this light is and how special it is to do the mitzvah each day, adding the light, adding the candle, even to stay lit for a short amount of time, for 30 minutes or so. But the Shabbat candle is a light of peace, because the real purpose of the world, like we mentioned before, is to bring peace in the world. This is the real purpose of the Torah. The real purpose of the Torah is to bring peace in the world. And a tzaddik, a righteous person like Jacob, understands that and realizes that he is going to have to go down and deal with Esav, deal with the bad, wrestle with the bad, go and call him the master, be the servant, whatever it's going to take, just to bring peace, to be able to work towards the transformation of Esav. And that is indeed what happened. After Jacob sent the gifts, and after Jacob approached Esav and kissed him with all of his heart, Esav said, Yehi lecha shalach, whatever you have should be yours. Meaning, the blessings are yours. I am agreeing to the blessings that are yours. Yes, I'm maybe not fully refined, but Esav comes forward to agree to the blessings because Jacob went down to a level which was not safe, was even, according to the Midrash, was even considered punishment and everything else, but in order to bring peace to the world, which then refined Esav, and Esav came to a higher level because of it. So this is the message from here, that we sometimes, as insulated as we want to be, we have to spread the light outwards and help others, even if it might not be so safe for us, from a spiritual or physical standpoint. And with that, I would like to wish everyone a happy Hanukkah. And once again, if we can help you with menorahs or candles, we've got traveling menorahs and candles, and it's very, very special mitzvah to light the menorah each light of Hanukkah. It's a light that has continued for so many years, and I encourage all of you to light your menorahs. And if there's any way we can help, please let us know. And there'll be a big Hanukkah party here at next Sunday. December 18, 4 to 6 p.m. and then a Hanukkah parade, a car parade on Wednesday. So look out for the emails, and we'd love to see you all. Also,
Thank you, Rabbi.
for Yud's Kislev, tomorrow night, I mentioned before the special day being Yud's Kislev, we're going to have a little farbrengen, a little gathering over here for Hakel, and a little gathering for Yud's Kislev, say some l'chaim and share some words of Torah. Tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. We're going to go and continue till about 9:30 or so. So feel free to stop by and say l'chaim with us.
Thanks, Rabbi. See you guys at the
great
end
week.
of the first of the year.
Sorry?
See you guys at the first of the year. I'll be gone for 2 times.
Yeah, see you next year.
Yeah. See you next year. Bye, everybody.
Okay, wonderful. All the best. Bye, everyone. Take care. Have a good week.
I thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.